I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. And we're here on another Mondays, and this Monday we are going to talk about subsonics. Now, the rifle in front of me is equipped with a Thunder Beast 30P1 suppressor. This is a bolt-action Remington 700. We talked about the whole rifle previously, so I'm not going to go into great details on the rifle. But this rifle shoots very well with standard velocity ammo, but we've been wanting to tinker a little bit with subsonic ammo. We have a silencer on this rifle, so why not try to make the rifle as silent as possible? Now, a lot of people, first of all, let's talk about terminology. They'll get bent out of shape about calling suppressors silencers and calling silencers suppressors, etc. Here's what you need to know about the terminology suppressor and silencer. First of all, the technical legal term for this thing on the front of my rifle here is a silencer. The original patents for the first silencers referred to them as silencers. The legal documentation that you have to go through to purchase one refer to them as silencers. The ATF classes these as silencers. The industry generally calls them suppressors because a silencer does not actually silence a rifle, especially when we are talking about a high-power rifle like the one in front of me. This rifle, equipped with this suppressor, is very quiet for a high-power rifle. We have a bolt action, which seals up the chamber until I'm ready to open it up and allow it out, so we don't get any sound that comes back. We don't have to listen to the action clacking forward and back because it's manually operated. When the bullet exits, the gas is vented into the suppressor, which then slows it and cools it and prevents that wicked muzzle blast. The one thing that this weapon system cannot stop is the sonic crack of the bullet going down range. The load that we usually fire in this rifle here runs a 175 grain Sierra Match King at about 2,500 foot per second. That is 2 times the speed of sound. Actually, it's a little bit more than 2 times the speed of sound. So that bullet is ripping out of here fairly quick. Well, as soon as it's exposed to the air, it breaks the sound barrier. When it breaks the sound barrier, it causes a shock wave to propagate away from the bullet, and that is the crack that you hear. If you're downrange on a rifle range, you may actually be far enough down, let's say you're in the 1,000-yard butts, pulling targets for a high power match. You're far enough away that you barely hear the muzzle blast from the rifles on the line. But when that bullet goes through the target, you will hear a crack. That's not the actual bullet hitting the target, that's the sonic boom reflecting off of the target. So you'll hear a crack even though you can't hear the report of the rifle. So what do we do about actually making this rifle silent? Well, we have to figure out how we get away from that sonic crack. And the easiest way to get away from the sonic crack is just prevent the bullet from breaking the speed of sound. So that's where we come into subsonic ammunition. We can now adjust the powder charge in our cases so that our bullet does not exceed the speed of sound. And we shoot for roughly about 1080, 1040, somewhere in that range. The speed of sound will vary depending upon the environmental conditions. So we shoot for just a little bit under the speed of sound. That way, if the environmental conditions change, the bullet stays subsonic. Now, when we go to load subsonic ammunition, there are quite a few different considerations that we're going to make. First of all, it may be intuitive at first just to reduce your powder charge down to where it doesn't push the bullet beyond the speed of sound. With the ammo that we normally run in this, we're using about 43 grains of Reloader 15. So you would think, okay, well maybe I just back that powder charge down to where I'm only putting 8 or 9 or 10 grains of Reloader 15 in a case, and that shouldn't push the bullet beyond the speed of sound. Well, that might kind of work, but what you would do is you would flirt with the possibility of a secondary explosive effect. What a secondary explosive effect is that when that primer lights off in the case, instead of getting a nice even burn in your powder column, the powder detonates. When we normally light off a full power rifle cartridge in here, there's quite a bit of powder in the case. In fact, I'm running probably beyond 80% fill with some of the loads that I run in 308s. So when that primer ignites, there's a ton of powder in front of it. It lights off the back of the powder column, and then that starts to burn through the powder column, increasing the pressure and pushing the bullet out of the case and into the barrel. We want that nice even burn. We want that gradual increase in pressure. And now, yeah, we're talking about just milliseconds, but it's still a gradual increase. It's not a detonation, it's a burn. Well, when you back your powder charge down so far and you're still using a fast burning rifle powder, then what you can get is that powder just lays on the bottom of the case, and when the primer ignites it, instead of burning through the charge, you've got a sufficient quantity of oxygen trapped in that case, you've got sufficient quantity of a very volatile material, and it just detonates. And when it detonates, that spike goes up really fast, and it may exceed what the receiver is able to contain, and you may detonate your rifle. So you definitely do not want to just back the powder charge down on rifle powder and then try to use that as a subsonic load. Instead, what you need to do is you need to look up loads that are specifically designed to be subsonic. Instead of using rifle powders, what is typically used are shotgun or pistol powders, and we have two good examples right here. This is Tight Group and this is Trail Boss. Now both of these powders, the reason I have them sitting here are their published loads for these two from the powder companies. So you know, if a powder company decided to publish a load and say this is safe to use in your rifle, they've made sure that that's safe to use in your rifle. With Tight Group, there is a published load on Hodgdon's website of 8 grains of Tight Group pushing a 168 grain Sierra Match King bullet. That is just barely supersonic in this rifle, so you actually need to take that load and you need to work down bit by bit until you're actually subsonic. Now the thing is, when we're taking Tight Group and we're taking an 8 grain charge of Tight Group and we're dumping it into a 308 Winchester case, we're really not getting any kind of fill whatsoever. I can typically put well over 46 grains of powder in a 308 Winchester case. So 8 grains of Tight Group just rattles around in there. We're not really getting any kind of volume. The powder will just lay on the bottom of the case, and it's really inconsistent on where the powder may be in the case. Now Tight Group was specifically designed to be able to use a little charge in a big case, so it kind of, the chemistry overcomes a little bit of the problems, but you still may see some inconsistencies in doing that. Now the solution to that, if you want a little bit better fill in your case, is Trail Boss. Now when we're looking at these two containers right here, this is typically a 1-pound container of powder. For Trail Boss, it is actually a 9-ounce can of powder. Now it was actually full when I got it, but it weighs about 9 ounces. So if that gives you an idea of the volume difference between these two. Now the published load for Tight Group is kind of funny. If you go on and you pull the guide for loading subsonic loads with Tight Group, this powder was designed really, I don't know if it was designed with a safety margin in mind, but it ended up with a really cool safety feature in mind. If you want to start out with a max charge of Trail Boss, then what you do, and the documentation from the manufacturer actually tells you to do this, take your bullet, decide how deep you want to seat your bullet into the case, hold the bullet next to the case, and mark off where the base of the bullet would end up on the case. You then fill your case with Trail Boss to that line, seat your bullet, and that is your max charge. You can actually safely run a full case of Trail Boss in a centerfire rifle. Now I still don't really advocate doing that, but according to IMR and Hodgdon's documentation, you can in fact do that. Most guys are running about 10 grains of Trail Boss to get their subsonic loads, but it will fill a case and not blow your rifle apart. So it is a really nice option. It's very difficult to get double charges with this stuff. So if you're going to play around with it and you're a less experienced reloader, I highly suggest using Trail Boss. Now let's talk about what we did. And I'm knocking things all over here. When we initially tried loading with tight group, we were using some old 168 grain bullets. They're close to 168 grain Match King, but they're really inconsistent, so they didn't make the cut for precision rifle rounds. I needed to burn them up, so I went ahead and loaded up some tight group charges with those bullets and shot them. And the results were really less than impressive. The bullets don't want to stay stable for too long. They're stable right out of the muzzle, so I don't have to worry about baffle strikes with the suppressor, but they don't really stay stable down range. They lose gas really quick because we're only talking about a 168 grain bullet, and we had less than stellar results when they hit the plate down range. It really was not a fulfilling expenditure. So while they'll work fine if you're going out and doing some subsonic coyote hunting or something like that, shooting pigs, maybe that will work just fine, but bear in mind you're also not getting any expansion whatsoever. Since we are limited on subsonic rounds with the speed of sound, we can't go any higher than the speed of sound, then we can't just push bullets faster to get more energy. So if you want more energy on target, if you want a louder bang when you hit that steel plate, if you want more energy transfer in to an animal that you may be hunting, then you need to launch heavier weight bullets. Now with a standard 308, 208 grain bullets are really the top end that you want to use, and you're sacrificing your speed and you're really not getting great ballistics out of shooting bullets that heavy in these kind of rifles and still being able to mag feed them. Now when we drop down to subsonic loads, we're kind of free of that little hang up. Because we again don't want to exceed the speed of sound. We're pushing the bullet slower so we can actually push a much heavier bullet, and that's where these guys come in. This is a 220 grain Hornady round nose bullet. Sierra also makes a 220 grain round nose, and these are great subsonic bullets for the 308. You're getting a really big bullet, you're getting a flat base and a round nose, which is a better bullet ballistically when we're not going to exceed the speed of sound. When we're shooting high power rifles at long range, we want those VLDs, we want that really sharp nose, we want the nice boat tail to allow the shockwave to come off the bullet really well. We don't have to worry about any of that when we're shooting subsonic, because these bullets, when you do your job right, are not going to break the speed of sound. So these are a great option for subsonic loads in a 308. And again, we're throwing a pretty heavy slug here, so we get a real good hit down range. Now we could even go heavier because we're not really using the full capacity of our cartridge. As long as we've got some room to seat them back and we can still get them in the magazine, then we could go heavier. But 220s are really about the top end of the commercially available bullets that you can go into your local gun shop and purchase. So they're a really good option. We don't want to get into really super expensive, crazy, high-end stuff, because we're not going to get the precision out of these rifles that we would out of something that was designed to be subsonic from the get-go. These were sent out by one of our viewers, Joshua. I want to thank him very much for sending out the Hornady round nose, because we haven't been able to get a hold of any of those locally. The local stores have been out of the 220 grain Sierras as well. You can get these online. They are not really as hard to find as some of our 308 match bullets, mainly because these are hunting bullets. Also, a word on the hunting bullet thing. Shooting these things at subsonic velocities, you're not going to get any expansion at all. So if you decide you want to go out and hunt deer, hunt pigs or something with them, bear that in mind. You're just going to punch a hole right through. You're not going to get any expansion. Hopefully you might get some tumbling, but no expansion whatsoever on these. Now when we load up our subsonic ammo, and for instance what I started out with was 10 grains of Trail Boss shooting a 220 grain bullet, and that actually was subsonic right off the bat in this 20-inch 1 in 10 twist barrel. We took them out initially and we put a piece of cardboard up at about 25 yards and fired through that, and we got some really nice round holes, so I knew we were stable. Went ahead and screwed the suppressor on, and we shot a couple of rounds down range, and they were incredibly quiet. take your ears off. You can shoot without ear protection, no problem whatsoever, because the suppressor, the Thunder Beast, was sucking up all of the muzzle blast, and the bullet was not breaking the speed of sound going down range. So really all you heard was it smacking the cardboard or heard it smacking the steel down range. And it's really a really fun time. We did test a couple of different charge weights. I started with 10 grains. I loaded up a couple with 10, a couple of 9.5, and a couple of 9, and that really wasn't necessary because we found right off the bat the 10 grain charge was below the speed of sound. I think it's run about 900 foot per second. So we could actually push it just a little bit faster, get a little bit better performance, a little bit less drop, and still be subsonic. So the next time we go out, we're going to work up from 10. Now, one real interesting thing with subsonic charges, especially if you're using something like tight group, you are not going to want to start low and work up. You want to do the opposite. You want to start high at the recommended charge and work down until you go subsonic. And the reason we do this backwards from what we do with supersonic ammunition is because if you start too low, you can stick a bullet in your barrel. I've actually had buddies that have done that. I've had buddies that have shot 300 blackout so slowly that the bullet was almost falling out of the barrel. So you want to be really careful. You don't want to stick a bullet because besides the safety concerns of sticking a bullet, now you've got to tap that bullet out of the barrel. And if you stick it halfway down, it's really going to be a pain in the butt to knock that bullet out of the barrel. So start high and work down until you get subsonic. Like I said, 10 grains here. 10 grains was a fairly common load that you'll find on the web, so that's where we started. I was fairly certain that 10 grains was not going to stick a bullet on me, but as we found, we were a little bit below. But even 9 grains of Trail Boss, we were still squirting these 220 grain bullets out fairly quickly, so we weren't in any danger of sticking a bullet there. Again, all your load workup needs to be done without a suppressor on the rifle, because if you put that suppressor on there and a bullet goes sideways, you're going to be in a world of hurt. It's not going to hurt you. It's really going to mess up your suppressor though, and it's more than likely going to have to go back to the manufacturer and be repaired. So we went ahead and we shot those, and we came across a really interesting effect. We were using a magnetospeed chronograph to shoot these loads, and we were actually not reliably picking up, I'm throwing the bullets around, we were not reliably picking up the bullets, and these are copper jacketed lead cord bullets just like our supersonic bullets, but for whatever reason the magnetospeed was not picking them up. I don't know if just the software was not wanting to register speeds that low, or if we had the sensor deck too far away from the bore. I did give a little bit of extra distance from what the manual states from the bore because I didn't want to have a bullet come out, go unstable, and hit the bayonet on the magnetospeed. So I did give a little extra room. We may go back next time now that we know these are stable and run the magnetospeed a little bit closer to the bore and see if we can pick them up. I've also got a call into magnetospeed to find out if they've experienced this before. The magnetospeed so far has worked absolutely exceptionally. We've got a magnetospeed version 3, and it is by far the easiest chronograph that I have ever used. We still have a review coming up on it, so stay tuned for that. Brian Litz, in his latest book, he even commented on how well the magnetospeed worked and how well it stacked up against some other chronographs that are out there. So I can definitely give the magnetospeed my recommendation. It's just in this little instance, I'm not sure exactly what was going on. Now, to be fair to the magnetospeed, we were shooting this at about 6:10, 6:20 in the morning before the sun came up. So it was a situation where we would not have been able to use an optical chronograph anyway, so the magnetospeed was the only option at all. We did pick up one shot that was 890 foot per second, but it threw an error when it picked up that shot, so I'm not sure. I will say that once we got done shooting the subsonics, without moving anything, without changing the configuration at all on the magnetospeed, I went ahead and fired our standard full power loads through, and it picked up every single one of those with very, very good accuracy. So the magneto speed was working the way it should. It just was having trouble picking up the subsonic bullets. And we'll report back when we do the full review on the magneto speed on what we figured out on that. So let's talk about real quick why you might want to go through all this trouble to make subsonic loads for your rifle. Now, if you're not in a suppressor friendly state or you don't have a suppressor, then there's really no reason to go through the trouble of working up subsonic loads. Just back off your regular loads if you want reduced recoil loads and run a light load. You don't have to go through the trouble of doing all these powders and working up something that stays below the speed of sound. Just go ahead and take your regular loads, work down. Don't go below the minimum charge weight in the book value because we don't want to run into that secondary explosive effect, but you can crank it down. Now, if you really, really want the absolute lightest, they used to be called gallery loads that you can load up, then go ahead and try some of this stuff. If you've got one of your kids that you want to put them on your full-size competition rifle, then it may be a good option there. Bear in mind you will have to make some pretty severe dope corrections. For this, we were shooting actually 3.4 mils low for the 10 grain, 3.4 mils low from my zero at 50 yards. So it's a considerable drop even at 50 yards from our full power supersonic ammunition. So you'll have to keep that in mind. The real reason that I wanted to work up these loads is because since I'm working the night shift now, this may allow me to go out and shoot at my range beyond quiet hours, because really all you'll hear is the bullet hitting the steel, and that really shouldn't be heard off of range property for very far at all. You won't really hear the blast of the rifle beyond our range property. So there is the possibility, if I got board approval, that I could go out in the middle of the night, wee hours of the morning, and shoot my competition rifle, do some barricade practice, that kind of stuff, with subsonic ammunition and not worry about disturbing the neighbors and causing some problems. If you do pest removal, if you hunt at night with suppressors, that kind of thing, then subsonic loads may be a really good idea. The good neighbor policy is in effect. It allows you to not irritate your neighbors, do target shooting in your backyard, all that fun stuff. So there are quite a bit of applications. We won't talk about the law enforcement or military applications because the reality of the situation is if you're one of those special folks and you need a subsonic rifle and subsonic ammunition, you're not loading your own. It's going to be issued to you. So we're not even going to go that direction. Now, if you're deciding if you want to go to the trouble of working up subsonic ammunition for your rifle, you need to take a look at the rifle first and see if it's even going to be suitable for doing this. Now, obviously, with a bolt-action 308 rifle, we don't have to worry about cycling the action because we do it manually. If you're working with a 223 or a 308 AR, then just bear in mind that subsonic loads are not going to cycle those systems. In fact, most center-fire semi-automatic rifles that shoot full-power rifle ammunition are not going to cycle subsonic ammunition. Now, when we get into stuff like pistol caliber carbines like 9mm 45 ARs or something like a 300 Blackout, those will cycle subsonic if you set them up to do so because they were designed that way. Most 45s are subsonic to begin with. 9mm, when you start getting up into the heavier 9mm ammunition, those are subsonic as well. When we get into 300 Blackout, 300 Blackout was specifically designed to cycle an AR-15 with subsonic ammunition. So those are little specialized niches, but overall, if you're not running with a bolt-action rifle, you're probably going to have to plan on cycling your action manually for a 5.56 or a 7.62 AR or something similar to that. Now, even if you've decided that it's okay, you want to cycle your action manually, or you want to run a bolt gun, there's still some other considerations we want to keep in mind. Mainly the twist of the rifling in your barrel. Subsonic bullets, because we don't have the muzzle velocity that we do with full power ammunition, generally require a faster twist to stabilize the same weight of bullet. JBM Ballistics has a really nice tool that we'll leave a link down in the description below that's a stability calculator. You can go on there, you can plug your numbers in, and if you come back with a stability of 1.5 or higher, that's a Miller stability factor, then that bullet with that weight at that muzzle velocity will be stable in your twist that you've inputted into the calculator. And JBM makes it really easy. Green says you're okay, yellow means you're kind of in the middle, and red means don't shoot it. That bullet's going to be tumbling when it comes out of the bore. So your twist factor is definitely going to be something you want to keep in mind. With 223 stuff, you're really going to want to run those 1 in 7 or higher twist barrels. With the 308s, this is a 1 in 10 twist, which is a really good intermediate twist if you're going to shoot a rifle supersonic and subsonic. Since I do shoot this rifle mostly supersonic, I wouldn't want to go put a 1 in 8 twist barrel or something on it, because that's really going to hurt my muzzle velocity, since it's going to cause me problems shooting at long range. I don't quite subscribe to the over twisting theory. I still believe you need to match your twist to your bullet. You sacrifice muzzle velocity if you get the twist too extreme, and you can cause some other problems as well. 1 in 10 though is sufficient to stabilize as heavy a bullet as you would possibly want to shoot supersonic, and the 220 grain round nose Hornady when you're shooting subsonic. So it's a really good intermediate twist. Both this rifle and our Mega Arms Ma-10 are 1 in 10 twists, so really we could shoot subsonic ammunition through either of those and be just fine. You don't want to go with too slow of a twist barrel, because again, you can run into situations where that bullet starts to tumble as soon as it breaks the rifling. And that's really not good for the life of your suppressor. Really, we're in the beginning phases of trying out this rifle with subsonic ammunition, so as we go along, as we find out other little things, we'll come back and talk to you about it. But if you have any tips or tricks, or you've been shooting subsonic ammunition for a while, I'd like to hear about it. Please leave them in the comments section below, or send it to us on Facebook or Twitter. As I said, this is kind of new ground for me. I'm an experienced reloader, but I haven't tried reloading subsonic ammunition before, and there is a little bit to it. There's a lot of stuff to tinker with. Just like when you're shooting full power ammunition or reloading full power ammunition, there are a lot of little nuances to subsonic loads too, and we are just starting to touch on those. So once we get our load worked out for this and we find the most accurate load, we're going to come back and we'll tell you a little bit more about it. That is really all we have for this week. It's been kind of a strange episode. We've had some scheduling glitches, so we've been having some trouble getting Mail Call Mondays out on time, but I appreciate you guys bearing with us. Also, I want to thank Anthony over at Tampa Bay Rifle Club for sending out the shirt I'm wearing today. Tampa Bay Rifle Club is on Facebook, so if you're down in the Florida area, make sure you check them out, and we'll leave a link to the Tampa Bay Rifle Club down in the description below. That's about it. My voice is getting ready to go, so we're going to go ahead and cut this episode short. If you got any questions or comments, leave them in the comments section below, or send them to us on Facebook or Twitter. If you like the episode, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, get out and shoot.